Okay, we're going to make a list. Things to avoid when you're buying gold or silver. Milk spots, high prices, cartoon characters on your coins. Did these things make the list? You're going to have to watch to find out. We're going to keep this one pretty straightforward and look at some of the types of gold and silver that I would say you should avoid, particularly if you're new to this whole thing, if you're a beginner. Now, these are all going to be strong cases about value, not about how much you might like something. If I were to say, avoid the Scrooge McDuck coin, well, maybe you have nephews named Huey, Dewey, and Louie. You just really feel that they need this coin from you. Well, I can't speak to that. I can't speak to any special feelings, and I can't really speak to that particular coin at all because I'm sure there's going to be someone out there who's going to point to an eBay listing. Maybe it looks like a huge win. I don't know. But what I'm focused on here is going to be the general case of things to avoid. What has stood out to me after 15 years of buying, selling, and probably overanalyzing, things that have been painful, things that I would avoid if I was starting over today. Before we get back to it, if you're looking for precious metals, hit up SD Bullion. New customers even get gold and silver for spot. It's sdbullion.com/new. Now, the first one is a big one. It's the slabbed and graded modern bullion that's being sold for an upcharge. We're going to focus on gold here for a minute because this is a pretty common tool in predatory sales models. This is a 1 ounce American Gold Eagle, same as anything else. It's worth the spot price of gold plus a reasonable premium. Now, if I were to buy it at SD Bullion today, I'd pay 6, maybe 7% premium. And local shops would be pretty similar. Now, you'll see slab versions of this coin, though, being sold for much more. Usually it's being sold by companies who make money on high margin tricks using some story like, this one's collectible, it can't be confiscated. Now, I don't want to get too off track here because some of the companies doing this are in the super sleazy category and some of the companies are probably more in the white lie category. I'll just say be very careful about that pitch. The US Mint produced 850,000 of these exact coins last year alone. It is not collectible because it's slabbed in plastic. It's not worth more because it's safe from some made-up story that the government wants to take away your gold. If somebody's pitching you on the confiscation story, turn and run. Like I just said, the US government is actively minting and selling huge numbers of these coins. They're selling them, they're not confiscating them. Now, if you can get an American Gold Eagle in a slab with the MS-70 grade like this one has, and you can get that from a well-known grading service like NGC, well, some people will be willing to pay slightly more for it. So you have that. There's value to the extra authentication. There's value to a third party confirming its condition, saying, hey, this is perfect. And to some people, it's just nice to have a slab that clearly labels what it is. The part to avoid, though, is simply paying considerably more for that state. The only reason that I have one is that I bought it from a company who sold it as a loss leader. I paid spot for this coin, and then I declined their sales pitch for similar coins that they were trying to sell me at dramatically higher premiums. Now, if I'd paid more for a coin in a slab, well, my only way to recoup that extra price is to find the person who wants a perfect labeled coin, sell it to them. Maybe they'll give me an extra % or 2 for the premium, but beyond that, it's a game of finding a greater fool. So you should avoid this type of gold. Next up are proof coins from the US Mint, and I really feel like this shouldn't be a thing, like we shouldn't have to discuss it. And if you're saying to yourself, hey, that doesn't look like a proof buffalo, well, it isn't. I traded mine to a friend who wanted a 2019 proof buffalo because that year was meaningful to him. We'll come back to that. The US Mint sells these for a 50% premium on top of spot price. And earlier when I said these other predatory companies are selling for a much greater premium, well, the US Mint is kind of doing the same thing. The proof coins are shinier, but the gold content is the same, the design is the same, and the amount a local coin shop will pay you if you go to sell them is also the same. And I got mine locally for 3 or 4% over spot. That was a year after somebody paid the US Mint's wild premium. So somebody really got stung. Now when I had it, I had to store it separately from the rest of my buffaloes because I didn't want to scuff it in any way. Again, the field is shinier. So I was happy when I found someone who really saw extra value in it because it was just an odd man out in my stack. And I think that this is a really good lesson Shinier isn't always better. So switching gears, we're going to take a look at silver. I would say the next type to avoid is semi-numismatic silver coins. And this isn't because the coins themselves are bad in any way. I really kind of like these actually. The part to avoid is just paying significantly more on the hopes that you're going to make even more down the road, or to a certain extent just buying what you simply find cool. Because what I've found is that the more research I do personally for a purchase, the fancier it becomes. Maybe I really like dragons. I might really like this particular dragon or this series of dragons, and it becomes a case of buying what I find interesting rather than what is easiest to sell. A quick shout out here, one of these came from Silver Britches. He's just a stand-up guy. Now this brings up two problems. If I'm buying to collect, I need to know there's a buyer on the other end of the cycle. So the coin has to be hard to get in order to appreciate in value. And the problem with collecting collectible silver coins, at least to me, is that the margin is just too low to be worth finding a buyer, paying the transaction fees, packing the item, paying for shipping, and assuming the risk of selling to somebody that I don't know. It's just not worth it. Now, if I'm going to go back through a series and pay more for coins that are no longer being minted, it's even worse. The second problem is that if I'm buying to stack, I need to know that I have the widest buyer pool possible if I'm hoping to sell quickly or at scale. But in the best case, my local dealers are going to consider these coins to be worth the same as a silver round, which is fine if you don't overpay on the front end, but typically these coins aren't given. That's your loophole. If you can't get them cheap or you can get Silver Britches to give you one, great. But generally speaking, these are not a good option for stacking. This next one pains me. We're going to talk about semi-numismatic gold. Now, my favorite series of all time is Chinese Myths and Legends from the Perth Mint. I buy these coins because I like the designs, I know the mythology behind them, and I think that my kids, maybe my grandkids, will enjoy them someday. But given the proper motivation, enough time, and the right conditions, I could sell these for a decent profit. Now, these might be a little bit of an anomaly because of that, but there are lots of series like these. The Royal Mint in the UK has its own Myths and Legends series. It started out with the Robin Hood coins. Maybe you like those designs. Maybe you know the story behind those characters. Now, if you buy in that series, though, you're going to run into the same two problems I just mentioned with semi-numismatic silver coins. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Robin Hood coins or the Chinese Myths and Legends coins. It will take time to find a buyer. You assume all the risk and all the other things that go along with selling to a private party. Now, local shops, they're not going to pay you more because some obscure characters on the coin. You might really be into Morgan Le Fay or Homer Simpson, but give your local coin shop a quick call and ask them what they'd pay for that coin if you were to sell it to them. You won't like what they have to say. Now, don't get me wrong here. There are special coins, particularly those with low mintage release, and there is definitely a market for collectible gold and silver. But you have to be careful here. This is not something to stumble into backwards. The trick to this type is to sell when the series is hot, and if you bought because you find the coins interesting, you probably aren't doing that. And to make matters worse, if you're going to try to sell in an emergency, you're likely going to get stung. Just keep all that in mind. And number 5 is large or fancy bars. We're talking either metal here. Gold and silver bars are a great way to stack weight for cheap. And this 10-ounce Royal Canadian Mint bar, it looks nice and it's easy to sell. And I'll always pay a little bit more for something that isn't grubby. But you know what? A 10-ounce generic Sunshine Mint bar also looks nice. It's also easy to sell, but the RCM bar cost me $10 more. Personally, I don't really care about a $10 swing to grab what I like, but I know that I won't get it back when I go to sell it, and that's an extra 4% that I'm throwing away. Now, maybe you have this wonderful local coin shop who's willing to pay you a little bit more for an RCM bar than they would for a Sunshine Mint bar, but that is definitely not common. Bars are a wide category. Sunshine Mint bars and RCM bars, they're both very popular, but you can get much further out into the weeds, much more obscure mints that create stuff that most people just won't know. That makes it harder to authenticate them. That makes it harder to sell. In addition to that, you start to lose flexibility as the bars get larger in size. It's much harder to sell a 100-ounce bar of silver than it is to sell a 10-ounce bar. It's harder to sell a kilo bar of gold than it would be to sell a 1-ounce bar. So if you're buying bars to keep your price down, you just need to be buying the types that don't create other issues down the road. So 5 is a good number. I say we stop there for now. I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying there are only a few good ways to stack gold or silver. I'm not saying that at all. I'd actually say there are some pretty big loopholes in some of the types that I could have added to this list. If you take a look at American Silver Eagles, they tend to have extremely high premiums. They milk spot. Fractional Gold Eagles, that's another one. They're expensive too, but they are at the very top of the list of what most people want. I'm talking statistically, and if you shop around, you'll be able to find them for a decent price. You just have to allow some time. Old European gold, that's another one that didn't make the list today. You don't see it on the desk here, and there's a reason for it. You can definitely get stung in a sale, and I've talked about that a number of times. Sometimes dealers just don't want them, but some people are able to find those coins extremely cheap when they buy them, making that buy to sell spread work out pretty well. So it all depends. That's why my list today is as short as it is. Taken on their balance, most options have a list where the pros outweigh the cons. So let us know what you think. Scrooge McDuck fans, this is your chance. Do you agree with the list? Do you think I missed something? Let us know if there's anything that you've been stung on personally. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.